Okay, it's story time. 5 true scary stories. For months I had felt like I wasn't alone in my house. Late at night I would hear mysterious noises, sometimes muffled like the creaking of floorboards, sometimes thunderous like someone falling down the stairs, but always indistinct. I would often search my home after hearing the noises, to find nothing. All the rooms were empty, but the kitchen door was sometimes swinging shut as if someone had just walked through it. As the months stretched out, I just got used to it. When I heard the noises at night, I wouldn't even get out of bed. I simply assumed them to be disconnected and meaningless. Although the noises were still a concern for me, they couldn't be neighbours. My home was the only building for miles. One night I was lying down unable to sleep, a downpour of rain pelting the windows, when I hear the unmistakable sound of my front door slamming shut. Finding this alarming, I walked down the stairs worried at what I might find, but as always, I appeared to be alone in the house. After switching on a lamp was when I noticed the wet footprints on the floor. I followed them, from the front door, up the stairs, across the landing, and into the attic. I never liked attics, especially not this one considering the circumstance. Following the footsteps into the corner of the room, I noticed something I never had before, a small hatch. I twisted open the hatch to see a small, dark, crawl space-like room. With some hesitation, I forced myself to climb down through the hatch. The room was dark but dimly lit by a red light, just bright enough for me to see a small bed on the floor. My instincts told me to get out and phone the police, but I noticed the walls were covered in what looked like square postage notes. Moving closer to the wall, I realized that they were not postage notes. They were photographs of me sleeping at night. Hundreds of photographs of me, asleep, stretching back decades to when I was a child. That night I left the house and never returned. One afternoon, years ago when I was 13, I was walking home from the park. I was walking through a subway as it was the quickest route home. About 3 minutes into the tunnel, I noticed what looked like a homeless man sleeping on the ground ahead of me. This wasn't a rare sight, so I walked on thinking nothing of it. But as I approached him, and as I saw him from less of a distance, I realized that this was like nothing else I had ever seen before. He had long black hair that covered the top of his face so that his eyes could not be seen. He only had one arm, one freakishly long arm stretching across the floor. In fearful wonderment, I stopped walking just before I reached him. On his hand he had just 2 fingers and a thumb. As he was lying on his back completely still, I decided to quickly walk past him before he wakes up. As I step past his long misshapen arm, I feel the distinct grip of a human hand on my ankle. And in dread and terror I realized he was pulling me towards him. I immediately tried to pull my leg free from his grip, but he was too strong for me. Screaming "Get off me!" while kicking him with my other foot, I was soon able to break his grip, and I didn't hesitate to run towards the tunnel exit. As I sprinted towards the exit, I could hear his rough moaning voice, saying "Can't run, can't run, can't run." I never told anyone about the incident, but the next week I read in the local newspaper that children all over the town had reported being followed by a man with black hair and one long arm. I have always liked urban exploring. For a long time, my favourite hobby was to enter an abandoned building and search its inside. But that ended 13 years ago. I was in the African country of Chad, mapping out abandoned temples for a book I was writing. A 15-hour camel ride through the ugly clutch of the desert led me to the several hundred-year-old temple I had been told about. Only 11 feet tall, I didn't expect to find much, but I was amazed at how deep the ruins stretched underground. Following a long winding passage, I reached the bottom floor of the temple. I struggled to move for the 3 feet of sand on the floor that had clearly been blown in during sandstorms. What I saw was a wide tunnel stretching out in front of me. I could barely see the wall at the other end of it, so I switched on my lantern. As I walked through it, I noticed a small number of chambers on the left-hand side of the tunnel. They all seemed to be closed shut by metal bars, but as I approached it, it became clear that the fourth and last chamber had not been sealed off. I entered the chamber to get a better feeling of what it was like, and I was struck by how much it seemed like a prison cell. As I turned around to leave, I noticed another chamber opposite the one I was in. Like the others, it was sealed off by metal bars, but unlike the others, it contained 2 human skeletons. I took a step towards them, but as I did, 5 metal bars fell from the top of the doorway, sealing me into the chamber. I didn't know whether being trapped alive was what led to the deaths of those in the opposite chamber, but I knew it could easily be the death of me. The metal bars were very weak, so I was able to break them off and leave the temple unharmed. I don't explore abandoned buildings anymore, as I believe I nearly died in that desert. In 1998, I was living alone, working a terrible job in finance. About 3 times a week, I had been receiving phone calls from a young girl. She would say, "This is Leanne. You said it was safe, but it wasn't. You did this to me." She would then hang up. I never understood the message. When I redialed the number left by the phone call, all I heard was a loud beeping noise. It later came to light that the previous owner of my house once murdered the parents of a young girl named Leanne. A friend of mine and I were staying in a wood cabin for the weekend. We needed to get away from work, so we rented a cabin at the edge of a forest. It was 1986 and my life was collapsing around me. I had lost my life savings in tragic investments, and the next mortgage payment was long overdue. The cold night wasn't quite icy enough to unfasten the stress I felt, but still I sat there on the porch when I should have been asleep. I had been watching field mice moving along the forest floor, but by now it was too dark to see them. In the distance I could see my friend Mike next to the car we came here in. I had no idea what he was doing, but it looked like he was rummaging around on the ground searching for something. He rose to his feet to look at me. After staring at me for an unbearable length of time, he stumbled back towards the car. I couldn't see what he was doing, but he backed away from it just seconds before the vehicle burst into flames. Without time to question why he would do this, I ran inside to grab the fire extinguisher. When I reached the back room where the extinguisher was, I saw Mike asleep on the floor. With the realization that the man outside wasn't my friend, I ran back out, but by then he was already gone. The really chilling part of this story is that the stranger could just have easily set fire to the wood cabin while we were both asleep. I'm afraid that brings us to the end of our stories today. I'll see you again next week.